When Iran announced a missile strike on Netanyahu's office, the world froze for a moment because suddenly everyone started asking the same question: is Netanyahu actually safe? Before a war is ever won on the battlefield, it is first won in the mind. And right now, Iran is winning the information war in a way that is quietly shaking Israel's political foundation from the inside without firing a single additional missile. Here is what actually happened, step by step, so you understand why the entire world began asking one simple but unsettling question this past week. Where is Benjamin Netanyahu? On March 2nd, the third day of the war, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps issued an official military statement. They announced that their Khyber shaken ballistic missiles, a weapon system already proven in multiple strikes across the region, had been launched toward two specific locations inside Israel. The first target, the official office of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The second, the residence of Israeli Air Force Commander Tamar Bar. The IRGC described the strikes as precision operations, planned, targeted, and unexpected. But it was the final line of their statement that spread across the world at the speed of social media. The statement said, Netanyahu's fate is unclear. Israel's Prime Minister's office responded the same day. They dismissed the claim as fake news. The response was brief, categorical, confident. But it contained no visual proof, no press conference, no live video, no footage of Netanyahu speaking from a secure location. Just a written statement saying, the claims are false. In normal times, that would have ended the story. But these are not normal times. Since February 28th, Israel has been operating under strict wartime media restrictions. International journalists cannot freely access strike locations. Damage to military facilities or leadership sites is heavily censored. Israeli media cannot report on casualties or infrastructure damage without official clearance. In other words, the government controls almost everything the public sees about what is happening inside Israel's borders. And when information disappears, a vacuum forms. And in a vacuum, every unanswered question becomes its own answer. For nearly 5 days after the Iranian claim, Netanyahu did not appear in a live broadcast. No press conference, no direct public video. Israeli media later reported that he visited the Beit Shemesh missile shelter site on March 6th, where 9 civilians had been killed inside a bomb shelter. His office released a written statement the following day, but the absence of clear, time-stamped public appearances during those critical early days allowed speculation to grow around the world. Then a new development changed the situation again. On March 10th, 2 of Donald Trump's most senior Middle East envoys were scheduled to fly to Israel for direct meetings with Netanyahu. These were not routine diplomatic visits. Trump's special representative Steve Witkoff has been the primary back-channel in nearly every major regional negotiation, from Gaza ceasefires to hostage exchanges and even indirect talks with Iran. Jared Kushner, meanwhile, was one of the architects behind the Abraham Accords. Both men had visited Israel during conflicts before. Neither had ever canceled a trip like this, until now. Israel's Channel 12 broke the story. The Jerusalem Post confirmed it through separate sources. Both Witkoff and Kushner had called off their visit. No explanation, no new date, just cancellation. And the timing made the decision even more striking. Only 4 days earlier, the Jerusalem Post had already revealed a growing fracture between Washington and Tel Aviv. For the first time since the war began, the two governments had openly disagreed. American officials were reportedly caught off guard by the scale of Israeli strikes on Iranian oil infrastructure. Israel had warned the United States that oil facilities might be targeted, but it had not disclosed how extensive the strikes would be. When global oil prices surged past 120 per barrel, Washington was shocked just like the rest of the world. American officials were furious. Israeli officials were defiant. And now the two men tasked with managing that fragile relationship were not flying to Tel Aviv. What we are witnessing is not simply a mystery about one leader's location. What we are witnessing is a war within the war. A fracture forming between the two governments that launched this operation together just 11 days ago. And that fracture is now being carefully exploited by every actor in this conflict who benefits from seeing the United States and Israel pull in different directions. Iran understands this perfectly. If the two partners who started the war begin to diverge strategically, the entire operational structure of Operation Epic Fury begins to weaken, not from outside pressure, but from internal division. Whether the missile strike on Netanyahu's office caused real damage or not is almost secondary, because the real impact was psychological. A week of global uncertainty, a canceled diplomatic mission, and one question now circulating quietly among world leaders behind closed doors. Who is actually in charge in Israel right now? And perhaps more importantly, are Washington and Tel Aviv still united? To understand the tension between the two allies, you have to understand what each side expected from this war. When Operation Epic Fury began on February 28th, Washington's objectives were relatively clear. Destroy Iran's nuclear program, severely degrade its missile capabilities, and create conditions for regime change. American planners believed that once Ayatollah Khamenei was eliminated, internal unrest would erupt, the Iranian government would collapse, and a new political order would emerge. But that plan did not unfold the way it was expected. Instead, Mojtaba Khamenei quickly assumed leadership. Iran's security apparatus held together. The population did not rise up, and the war, which American planners expected to last days, has now stretched into nearly 2 weeks, every day costing almost $900 million. With no clear military resolution in sight, for Washington, priorities have now shifted from victory to exit. The United States needs a way out, a ceasefire formula, a political narrative it can present as success, and above all, a way to bring down global oil prices before economic pressure hits the American domestic economy. Israel's objectives, however, are very different. Netanyahu's government is not just targeting nuclear facilities. Israel wants Iran's entire missile production network dismantled. It wants the leadership of the IRGC broken, and it has been striking Iranian oil infrastructure far more aggressively than Washington ever intended. That disagreement is exactly what triggered the tension reported by the Jerusalem Post. Washington warned Israel about global economic consequences. Israel continued its operations anyway, and now the diplomatic relationship that launched this war is showing its first real signs of strain. Meanwhile, Iran has been fighting this war strategically, not blindly. It has been carefully studying the relationship between its two adversaries and applying pressure exactly where that relationship is most fragile. Every strike, every statement, every information leak has targeted a different pressure point. Civilian infrastructure strikes challenged the moral legitimacy of the war. Attacks on American bases increased domestic political pressure inside the United States. And the claim about Netanyahu's office targeted something even more powerful: global perception. Perception that Israel might not be fully in control. Each of these moves produced real consequences. International organizations have already opened investigations. Several Gulf states have refused to join the offensive. Even Western allies have limited their involvement. And as the war drags on, global energy markets are beginning to shift in ways that benefit another major power watching from the sidelines: Russia. Every additional day of conflict strengthens Moscow's economic position. Energy prices rise, European markets tighten, and suddenly Russia begins to look like one of the few stable suppliers left. All while the two countries that started the war together are now facing their first serious internal disagreement. Which brings us back to the central issue: not just where Netanyahu is, but what happens when the two architects of a war begin to lose trust in each other before the war has even reached its midpoint. Because in conflicts like this, the first cracks inside an alliance are rarely the last. In fact, history shows something even more dangerous. Once those cracks appear, they almost never stay small.